Making your own marinara. Is it worth it? Or should you just use the store-bought kind? We are going to do a full analysis, cost breakdown, ingredient for ingredient, size for size. You can see here I have two 32-ounce containers. We're gonna break it all down here in this latest episode in the Is It Worth It series, marinara sauce, store-bought versus homemade. Let's get to it. Okay, let's look at the ingredients and do a cost breakdown and analysis here for homemade marinara versus store-bought marinara. So this here is a larger 32-ounce container from the warehouse store, $4. There are other options from the grocery store. You can get a 24-ounce name brand for $7 or $8. You can get a 15-ounce store brand for $2.50. So there is kind of a range of price point for the size. I pulled this 32-ounce can because it's going to be the closest that I'm going to get to 2 cans of tomato sauce plus the other ingredients. Quantity-wise, this is the closest that we'll get doing a homemade, and I just wanted to compare it quantity for quantity in this video. But just know that there is a range of prices for the store-bought one depending on store brand, name brand. If you like a particular one, that's great. Just know that there's a wide range of price options. For making homemade, I pulled out some ingredients that I just already had. I have the bulk of this. I grabbed some crushed tomatoes from the store, although I usually have some on hand. I have garlic, basil, onion, oregano, and thyme, and then a little bit of sugar. I don't usually add thyme, but I pulled it out as like if you wanted to add a little of that flavor in, you can. So here is the cost breakdown. 96 cents for the cans of tomatoes each. So that's just under $2. About 10 cents for the garlic and onion, a little bit more if you were going to be using fresh. I'm just going to be using what I have from the fridge and the pantry here with the minced dried onions and the minced garlic. Then a little bit of olive oil. I didn't grab the jar out there, but I get the big jar of olive oil, so it ends up being about 5 cents or so per tablespoon. And then some dried basil and oregano. Of course, you could use fresh as well, totally up to you. And then a pinch of sugar. That is to cut the acidity of the tomatoes, just to give it a little bit more balance. The olive oil and the sugar will help create that balance in the sauce. And all together, we're looking at $2.25 for about 30 to 32 ounces of homemade marinara sauce. This one is $4, so you can see the cost savings are already there. Okay, let's hop on over to the stovetop so I can show you how easy this is to make a homemade marinara sauce. Okay, I'm going to get this all ready to go. I'm actually using my skillet, 1, because it'll heat up faster and simmer faster. 2, because my other 2 saucepans are in the wash. Isn't it funny how that always happens when you need something and it's not here, but we are going to just improvise. Okay, we're gonna start with a can of crushed tomatoes. Okay, I want every bit of goodness, so I'm literally hugging the tripod here. I'm gonna use my little mini spatula. It's the best size for getting these cans scraped out, especially the crushed tomatoes tend to be, it's slightly thicker tomato sauce, so I want every bit out of there as possible. Okay, then a can of tomato sauce. I like this combination of a little chunky from the crushed and then saucy from the sauce. All right, let me just scoop all this out. I'm gonna add a hearty garlic. That's about a tablespoon-ish. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of olive oil. Again, that's this giant container. It is ounce for ounce, tablespoon for tablespoon, the cheapest way to go. Missed a drop there. Heaping teaspoon of onion. I don't want too much onion in there. I like more garlic. And then I'm gonna do a teaspoon of oregano, basil, and a touch of thyme, and that's really, and I'm gonna adjust after I let it simmer for a little bit. And then last, I'm gonna just do a touch of thyme, like a quarter of a teaspoon. And then last but not least is going to be, I'm gonna do a big pinch of sugar. Just sprinkle that around, and then we're gonna mix this together and let it simmer. Okay, I've got this over high heat right now, and then I'm gonna reduce it as soon as I see the first bubble pop. I'm gonna just put this vanilla back to good use, mixing all these flavors in here. We're gonna bring this heat up. It will bubble here in a couple minutes. Once I see that first bubble, I will reduce the heat and just let it simmer for a few minutes to get all of those flavors time to mingle and marry. Now, if I was using a fresh onion and garlic, what I would do in that case is I would cut it up into tiny pieces, like very finely chopped onion, and I would saute the onion and garlic in probably 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I only added 1 here, but I would use 2. And then I would let that, once those onions soften, then I would add in the 2 cans of tomato sauce, the spices and the sugar. And that way it gives those aromatics time to release and soften before adding in the rest of the sauce. But since I'm using minced garlic and the dried onion, I don't need to do that, but I just wanted to share that option for if you were using fresh garlic and fresh onion. Okay, I'm gonna reduce this heat here in a minute once I see that first bubble and let it simmer for a few minutes, and I'll be back shortly with a comparison of homemade versus store-bought marinara. Okay, it did not take long at all. There you can see the first bubbles, and this is when I am going to reduce the heat and let it simmer. Okay, this is a very warm jar. I have to be careful here. I transferred the homemade marinara sauce after it simmered for about 10 minutes here into this quart-sized jar, in large part to show you the comparison, and second because I just want to keep this in the fridge for a meal that we will have this week, and to tell you a few other storage ideas for this. So here is the final comparison. Here is roughly $4. This is a name brand, but from the warehouse store. We had the range of $2.50 or so for the smaller jars, up to $8 for a 32-ounce jar of a name brand. So quite the wide range here. The ingredient total for my homemade marinara, $2.25 roughly, with using a can of tomato sauce and a can of crushed tomatoes, a little under $2 for both of those, plus all of the spices and mix-ins that we added, and I had those in the pantry, and I just did a rough estimate of what all of those would be. So you can see here, ounce per ounce, homemade is definitely the best option. The convenience of making this homemade marinara, it's not too difficult to do. It's add some ingredients into a skillet or a saucepan, let it simmer for a couple minutes while you're getting your other parts of your meal ready to go, add it into your meal however you would use this jar. So with a jar like this, it's easy, just pour in, if you're making spaghetti sauce with your beef or sausage, pour it in, heat it up, or you can just quickly make your own like this. So definitely convenience wins here, but cost is the overall winner. Plus it's not that hard to make a homemade batch like you saw there. So my final opinion is homemade marinara wins. I do keep jars like this on hand, either if it's a specialty flavor, like we like the autumn butternut squash based marinara that Trader Joe's sells in the fall. And then I also keep them like this for when my husband or the kids are gonna make spaghetti. They can just grab and go. They don't have to fuss with making homemade. That's my special treat to make for them. Okay, before we wrap this up, I want to share some ideas for how to store this. This is the homemade marinara. I'm just going to keep it in the fridge and use it up in the next couple of days. I would say up to 4 to 5 days in the fridge. If you aren't going to use it right away, or if you're going to do a double batch, I will do that sometimes where I'll use some for dinner and then I'll save the rest for later. You can either can it if you have the canning supplies. You can also freeze it, just transferring the cooled down sauce into whatever freezer containers you use, baggies, silicone bags, whatever other containers, and freeze. Then you can just let it thaw in the fridge overnight and reheat it in your saucepan or skillet. There we have a couple of ways to store your homemade marinara if you need it. Homemade wins on cost, and it's just not that difficult to prepare. If you learned something new, please like this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know when you're going to make this homemade marinara. I predict that once you make it, you will like that you can control the flavors and you will not want to go back to the store-bought kind unless you really need that convenience or someone else is cooking you dinner like at my house. Also, don't forget to subscribe here. We're releasing new videos all the time, both in the Is It Worth It series, as well as other helpful budget hacks and freezer cooking videos. All right, my friend, it's bye for now, and I will see you in the next episode.